English 201, week 3, part 3. All right, we're probably gonna wrap this thing up now. This is exciting. We're really going good on this Phoenix Turtle thing. Um, so they didn't have children, um, because their love was a kind of pure spiritual love. This was something people were really interested in the Renaissance. Is this idea of a love that's kind of so pure it doesn't involve sex and bodies. So last two stanzas. Truth may seem, but cannot be. Beauty brag, but 'tis not she. Truth and beauty buried be. So it's a very depressing idea. But the idea is that because these birds were such a perfect example of beauty, their love was so beautiful, but also they're a perfect example of truth, which is a tricky, it's being used in a tricky way in this poem, I think. But I think truth means they were true to each other. So I think truth there means something more like faithfulness. Um, so the second to last stanza of the poem, truth may seem, but cannot be. Beauty brag, but 'tis not she. Truth and beauty buried be. The idea is that these birds were so faithful and so beautiful that when they died, there is no more beauty in the world and there's no more faithfulness in the world. It died with them. Again, I would remind you, this is a funeral. And so sometimes when you're at a funeral or somebody dies, you feel that's like your lowest point. That's like when you feel really dark. Like you're like, so if you love somebody and they die, you're like, I'm never going to love anybody again. They're saying here, there will never be beauty in the universe again. There will never be faithfulness in the universe again. I'm going to suggest in a couple minutes that they're exaggerating. But I just want to, just to understand what the logic of it is just like you would be like, I'll never fall in, like when you get your heart broken, you're like, I'll never be in love again. But then you do. So it's not the end. It feels like the end, but it's not the end. But at the time, you might say it's the end. Teenagers do this all the time, where they have these big hyperbolic reactions to things. So truth may seem, meaning you might think you see truth out there in the world, but it cannot be. Beauty brag, meaning you may feel like beauty is out there bragging about itself, but it's not beauty. Why? Because truth and beauty died with these fucking birds. All right, let's finish this poem. Last stanza. To this urn, let those repair. Repair is being used in a funny way that's confusing to people. You guys are used to repair meaning to fix. But the word repair actually means to return to where you were. So he says, to this urn, let those repair, meaning all the people at this funeral, you can repair, meaning return to this place again. The reason you're used to repair, meaning to fix, is because when you get something repaired, you are getting it returned to how it used to be when you bought it. Right? You bought it and it worked fine. Then it broke. You get it repaired. It works fine again. It has been repaired. It has been returned to how it used to be. So the people, the guy, the reason at the funeral is saying, to this urn, let those repair. Meaning, those of you at the funeral, come back again and again and look at this urn with the ashes of the two birds. Just like you go to a funeral and do a funeral thing, but then you'll go back to the graveyard maybe a year later and then the year after that to remember this person that died. That's you repairing to the graveyard where you first had the funeral. So, to this urn, let those repair that are either true or fair. Fair here means beautiful. This is my fair lady, means my beautiful lady. My fair princess. It's kind of fair is an old-fashioned word for beauty. The ancient Greeks had this idea that beauty meant things were in balance, which is why fairness, you're used to fair meaning equal, like two people get the same thing. That's fair, because it's balanced. The idea is if your features, if your face and your body and everything are all balanced, you're beautiful. In fact, if you want to make somebody look very ugly, usually you give them like one giant eyeball or ears that are way too big for their head because they're out of balance and now ugly. To this urn, let those repair that are either true or fair. For these dead birds, sigh a prayer. And that is the end of the poem. Now, we have talked about summary, which is just figuring out what the hell is going on in this poem. And that's this whole thing about the birds, who's coming to, you have to look at vocabulary words and realize, oh, birds are coming to the funeral. Some birds can come, some birds can't come. And some birds have jobs to do. And then you have characters that give speeches. And so you have to understand that there's a big eulogy for the dead people. And then Logic, who is like a character in the poem, decides to give a speech. And that's a summary. For metaphor, you have some small metaphors, and I'm going to talk about some bigger ones in a minute. But You have some small metaphors like calling that first bird is like a trumpet. What does the bird have in common with the trumpet? It announces things. It's quite loud. You also have some fancy metaphors in there, like reason. What if logic were a person? It would be like this person at the funeral who gives a speech. Numbers is like, what if math were a person? This whole situation with the phoenix and the turtle would murder math, because the mathematics of the phoenix and the turtle make no sense. Cool. And then there was irony, which is this idea, this like paradox is a kind of irony, that things don't go together. Somehow if you're two and one at the same time, that's ironic. And there's lots of different examples of irony, as Shakespeare says, tries to explain over and over again how these two birds can also be one bird. Okay, cool. So what we have left is, and I talked about sound with the rhythm and the rhyme, how many beats per line. And I mentioned it has 4 stressed beats per line. It's in that Facebook pattern. The stanzas have 4 lines, and it rhymes A, B, B, A, because the first and last line of each stanza rhyme, and the 2 middle stanzas rhyme. And then in the end, you get stanzas that are 3 lines, and all 3 of those lines rhyme with each other, like A, B, B, B. That's it. We did pretty good. We have a couple of things left to do before we wrap up this poem. So I guess one thing I'd like to do before we do our final wrap is return to the Batman issue that got me interested in this poem in the first place. It's interesting now that we know what we know. So once again, we got this is the same Batman comic book. That's the Penguin. So again, Penguin, somebody died, and they like feel bad for him. And then Penguin gets sent to jail. He sort of sends himself to jail because he wants to talk to Bane, who's like the big bad guy. He quotes in jail, "To this urn let those repair that are either true or fair." Right, that's the second to last line. That's the last stanza of the Phoenix and the Turtle poem. The comic book is called The Tyrant Wing, right, which is again a line from the poem. Let this session interdict every bird of tyrant wing, save the eagle feathered king, keep the obsequy so strict. And the Penguin's talking about the dead body of this person, Penny, who died, and they're like, oh, they feel very bad for him. We didn't do a funeral. Her dad's been looking for her. Anyway, I'm kind of reviewing this again. I am, and then when you see the people, only people who knew her, only people who understood how special she was, and once again you get the graves. So they loved as love in twain, had the essence but in one. Two distincts, division none. Number there in love was slain. So again, I think it's really lovely that he has 2 lines from the poem and then the next 2 lines from the poem. So these 2 things make a stanza because again, him and this person who died are going to be, they're one. They're essentially linked. And one of the ways they show that is because this is one stanza of poetry. This is line 1 and 2 of that stanza, and this is line 3 and 4 of that stanza. And yeah. Cool, because it rhymes, right? Twain rhymes with slain, one rhymes with none. Yeah, and he says, they all thought you were small and silly, another lost thing to be passed around from man to man, the way you were treated almost your whole life as if you were less than human. They never understood, never considered that maybe you had a soul. Once I finished the Shakespeare poem, I realized something real fucked up. Penguin seems to be it sounds like Penguin's burying his wife. This is Penny Cobblepot. His name's Oswald Cobblepot, and this is Penny Cobblepot, and he's burying his wife, and this is extremely sad, and he wants to be buried next to her, and he has this Shakespeare poem from this bird funeral. I think Penny was a fucking penguin, like an actual penguin. That's why you never see the body in the comic book. It's why the poem about a bird funeral is there, because this entire issue is about a bird funeral. Penguin's penguin died. The penguin is a person who dresses up like a penguin and sort of has a penguin theme with the tuxedo and the, But I think that the character that died in the story is an actual penguin. That's why I'd say her father's been looking for her, because I think that her dad penguin is just wandering around. You never see her dad. You never hear him say anything. And I think that that's the ridiculousness of the poem. The craziness of the comic book is in the fact that I think this is an animal funeral. For Penny is like his beloved pet, but he's a penguin, and so he says that nobody ever considered that she had a soul. And of course, one of the things that the Shakespeare poem is about birds having souls, and not just 2 souls, but 1 soul. The idea is that this penguin might have been this actual bird, the penguin, might have been the Batman comic book villain penguin's like soulmate. It's just really crazy when you realize that the entire issue is built around a bird funeral, and that's why the writer of the comic book, a guy named Tom King, decided to put a bird funeral poem in the thing. Okay, we're just about done. I'm going to come back and talk about Phoenix and the Turtle one more time, and then we are finished.